This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast.
The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast.
With Stuart Cameron and Robin Purdie.
Hello and welcome to the 22nd edition of the Scottish Rugby Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to club rugby in Scotland. And with me is Robin Purdie, very much part of our team on Rugby Radio. And as there's just one game this weekend because of the Scotland match against France this Saturday, we thought we'd have a little chat about the game in Scotland in general, what's been happening this season, what's likely to happen in the future, and addressing many of the subjects related to the club game in this country. But let's start with a quick recap of last week's games. And here are the results from the Premiership. It was Curry 36, Embrackis 10, Heriots Blues 10, Glasgow Hawks 19, Musselburgh 33, Marr 39, Jedforest 12, Kelso 48 and Selkirk 3, Hawick 59. Now, just a glance at those results, obviously it tells us quite a few things. It tells us that Kelso are in the playoffs in 4th position. Glasgow Hawks winning at Golden Acre. Not many people saw that coming, apart from obviously Glasgow Hawks themselves winning at Golden Acre, meaning that Heriots Blues didn't get any points at all. So Kelso confirming in 4th place, and Marr winning at Musselburgh, Curry winning against Embrackis, and really that's down to a couple of weeks' time. It's just really a case of who is going to get that home spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, some interesting results. You're right. I don't think many people would have seen the Glasgow Hawks win at Heriots Blues coming. I certainly didn't, especially after Heriots had run Hawick so close at home the week before, and it was all, it was kind of all in their hands, effectively, or still in their hands as far as the playoffs were concerned. So yeah, that's them. But fair play to Glasgow Hawks. I think that's their first win in 9 or something like that. So yeah, that's a good effort to go through there. And I still think the Hawks are shorn of a few players as well. So all credit to them for that. Kelso, fair to say, Kelso is probably the story of the season, to be honest, for them to come up from National 1 and make the playoffs. And let's not forget, they've not had a revamp last summer of the playing squad. They've not got the chequebook out. They've brought in a couple of lads from the lower leagues, and that's about it, from I'm aware. So they've done remarkably well. It's a brilliant story, and my word, what a mouth-watering semi-final that's going to be against Hawick at Mansfield.
It certainly is, and of course Hawick coming into a lot of form, peaking at the right time, it would seem as well. A big win at Selkirk, and of course Selkirk are a team that have done pretty well against Hawick in the recent seasons.
Yeah, Selkirk coming off some impressive form, a couple of good away wins, none more so than Edinburgh's a couple of weeks ago or whenever it was. But yeah, Hawick just doing what champion teams do, hitting their straps, if you like, at the right time of the season. That's we talk about statement wins. That was a statement win. I seen Hawick winning that game. Of course, I did. They're top of the table, but I didn't see it being by the margin that it was. And they look to be purring now, and they've got Linton back, and they've got some other. The week before they didn't have a recognised second row playing. Now all of a sudden, they do again, and Linton's there, and yeah, they just look to be hitting things right at the right time.
So for the second year running, top of the table, should be champions in my book, of course, but my book is different to the rule book, and that says you've got to do another couple of matches. And I know you're a big fan of the playoffs. I'm not, but that's the rules, and that's the way we have to look at it.
It's what I'd like to see. As I've said to you before, I'd like to see there being something for whoever finishes top. In Rugby League, in Super League, they have the League Leader Shield. You get handed the League Leader Shield, and then you go into the playoffs to get to the grand final at Old Trafford. Now
that would soften the blow a wee bit.
It would soften the blow, but at the same time, if you were to go down to the north of England and ask a St Helens fan or a Wigan fan, do they give a monkeys about the League Leader Shield? They don't. All they're concerned about is the grand final. So and we look at we look at other leagues as well and how it works in the Southern Hemisphere, in the Gala Premiership and the French Top 14 and the URC. And I think with this, in this country, it's still quite a new concept. But as time goes on, I think the mindset will change to almost being, well, the league is just the kind of thing that you jostle for position to get into the playoffs, and you have this showpiece event, and hopefully every year it's like it was last year in terms of drama.
Let's go into National 1 and give the results there. 4 games were played. Dundee 56, Gala 19, an under-strength Gala side going to a rampant Dundee at the moment, who are wagging their tail at the bottom of the table and look as if they're probably going to avoid the relegation at the expense of GHK. GHA 43, Biggar 25, Glasgow Accies 35, Highland 19, and Watsonians 28, Melrose 20. 25, and as we've said in the last few weeks, really, National 1, it's been done and dusted by Ayr many, many weeks ago, and it's disappointing, really, because from a league's point of view, because the last few years, National 1 has been the gift that keeps giving, as we kind of have dubbed it, but looking at this year, take Ayr out of the equation, and you've got Highland on 51, Melrose 51, GHA 51, and Watsonians on 50. It doesn't come any closer than that, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's really exciting below Ayr, and it's been exciting at the bottom. Fair play to Dundee. They've really put it together the last couple of weeks when the pressure's been on, admittedly against an understrength Gala, but that was a massive result for them the week before to go to Melrose and win, and they look pretty good now for survival. But yeah, it's exciting, and below Ayr and Melrose are second at the moment, but they've only got one game left to play, and that's away at Glasgow Hawks. Whereas I think the Ackies have got a couple of games still to play, and Watsonians don't look to have that difficult a run in. And all of a sudden, the likes of Melrose are sitting in second at the moment, but they could quite feasibly finish up. If they don't win at Ackies, they could be looking at fourth, they could be looking at fifth. So there's still a bit to play for in terms of pride, I guess.
GHK, now, a couple of weeks ago, they must have been thinking, we've got this. Dundee aren't playing very well. All of a sudden, Dundee go to the Greenyards, of all places, and get a big result, a big win, and they back it up with an understrength Gala team at home at Mayfield, and all of a sudden they only need 3 or 4 points, I think, and they're going to be safe from relegation, sending GHK down. Now, from my point of view as a commentator, separating GHA from GHK is absolutely brilliant for next season, because it will avoid a lot of confusion. But being serious for a moment, from a GHK perspective, that's obviously going to be disappointing for them with regards to local derbies against them and GHA and also Glasgow Ackies. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of fun in that division through in Glasgow this season with those teams playing each other, and there's been lunches, and they've made a big deal of it, and rightly so. So yeah, it's unfortunate. It's looking like GHK now their goose is cooked, unfortunately for them. I think they wouldn't have seen Dundee going to Melrose and win. Who did? I certainly didn't. Dundee have, to an extent, lucked out a wee bit because they've got Gala at a time when Gala have got a whole load of boys down in Wales for the rugby. That can't be helped. That's just the luck of the draw. But Dundee have had to battle. They can only beat what's put in front of you, and fair play to them. Business end of the season, pressure's on, and they look to have done the job. National 2 then, and the results from last week, just 3 games played. Important ones though: Falkirk 38, Berwick 14, Stumel 35, Gordonians 14, and Stirling County 29, Peebles 40. Now, the top of the table clash, obviously, it's all about Falkirk and Peebles. Peebles at the top, winning by 1 point, and they know themselves, if they just keep on winning with try bonuses, nothing Falkirk can do about that. Falkirk just basically waiting their turn, hoping that Peebles will slip up on their next match at Kirkcaldy, or the final game, which is March the 16th at Ruberslaw up in Aberdeen. That's going to be tricky for them. Falkirk, on the other hand, have got a big game coming up with Lass Wade. But Falkirk certainly coming into form. To be fair as well, Peebles have certainly controlled Falkirk in the 2 matches, beat them twice quite convincingly. And how do you see that one going?
Still in Peebles' court. I think that was a big win up at Stirling. It had the slight look of a banana skin about it. That Stirling are one of the great bastions, if you like, of the last 30 or 40 years in Scottish.
And they didn't go away, because I know Peebles went to a 14-0 lead, just as they did against Newton Stewart, and then back came Stirling County. But Peebles did have that extra gear that they could go into. That's
right, and it did kind of, when we were at Jed, when we were watching the results coming in, did kind of raise an eyebrow, that one, when Stirling got back into it after Peebles' quick start. But yeah, that's professional stuff by Peebles. They've only, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, they've only had away games, and that brings with it its own pressure, albeit against teams at the lower end of the league. But workman-like professional stuff for Peebles, and that's all they can do. You're absolutely right. 5 points every single game, that's the target, and they win and they go up. But Falkirk are hot on their heels, absolutely, and it's making for an exciting end to the season. And just looking at the other game there as well, Stumel, how much have they improved as the season
under gone? Alex Haggard? Yes, and that's
tremendous. That's great to see, because Gordonians started the season certainly very much in the nay mugs category, and yes, Stumel have really picked up results as the season's gone on, and they were docked those points, and fair play to them.
And Gordonians, of course, are let's say they've won the bragging rights in the Aberdeen area, having beaten Aberdeen Grammar twice this season. And I was up at Rubislaw having a little recce just in case we have to go up there in the snow in March. And, tinge of sadness a wee bit, because Aberdeen Grammar were a Premiership side. They dropped to National 1, currently in National 2. They could well go down to National 3 as well. And you don't want to see a team with that history, particularly in Caledonia. It's a difficult area to nurture talent, and they now have this struggle on their hands along with Berwick to stay into National 2. And Stirling County, as we mentioned, 4 points from safety, so I don't think they're going to come into the mix, but it's all down to Aberdeen and Berwick.
It is, and they've possibly got the similar clubs with potentially similar issues, and that's geography. Unless you've got a great crop of local lads, and that can come down to nothing more than luck, to be honest. Let's face it, if a group come through at the same time, it's difficult to pull in players from elsewhere because of where you're based. It's not like being a club in Edinburgh and you're struggling, and you get the checkbook out and you bring in guys from other surrounding clubs, or East Lothian or West Lothian or whatever, or even up from the borders. It's tricky, and these clubs, they have to, every other week they've got a massive journey, and that'll take its toll as well as the season goes on. If you're not in the best of places, sort of wins wise, that kind of stuff, and guys lose interest a wee bit. And we've spoken before about the niggles, just a wee bit more niggly when you're losing. But then you factor in an all day bus trip as well, and it's tricky, and it's a shame for Aberdeen, and it's sad to see, but it can be a slippery slope, and once you're on it, it's hard to get off it. And you look around the leagues up and down, and there's others that could find themselves in the same predicament as well. And it's just for some, it's just about sort of halting the slide effectively, and consolidating and trying to build back from there.
So Aberdeen, Grammar and Berwick, it's really down to those two. How do you see it going? They've got 3 games to play.
I think Berwick are favourites. I think Berwick
3 home matches.
Yeah, I think Berwick will stay up. 3 home matches. One is against Kirkcaldy, I think.
Yep.
Gordonians,
yep.
And Last Wade, but I think it comes down to the Kirkcaldy game for me. If they can win that and get 5 points from that, bearing in mind Kirkcaldy are in and around that part of the table as well, then I think that seals the deal for Berwick.
Aberdeen have got 2 home matches, but they're against Stumel, who are in form, and Peebles on the last day of the season, when it could be that Peebles are going for the championship. So that's going to be tough, and their one away game is against Last Wade, which again is going to be very difficult.
Looking at the way the fixtures have fallen for these last 3 games for both these teams, then you'd be a fool to bet against Berwick, and of course they've already got that 5-point advantage.
We were mentioning earlier about journeys and stuff like that, and Newton Stewart, who are currently in National 2, of course, we're looking over their shoulder to see how Orkney were getting on, because there's no bigger journey than Newton Stewart to Orkney, that's for sure. Top of the country to the bottom of the country. As it happened last week in National 3, it was a win for Preston Lodge against Orkney in that big top of the table clash. 51 points to 12 in the end, a convincing victory at the Penny Pit for Preston Lodge. Boroughmuir 63, West of Scotland 21, and Hillhead Jordan Hill 61, Cartha 14. So big results there. But that Preston Lodge Orkney result was absolutely massive. Preston Lodge only losing to Orkney away from home by a couple of points. But they've gone on, they've got the points. Orkney had 3 or 4 games in hand, but it all came down to this one.
Yeah, it did, and all credit to PL. They've had a great season. That's a really big win in what is more or less a kind of playoff, a pressure situation. They've responded really well to the disappointment of last season. They had a similar type thing. By the other end of the table, when Berwick went up there and what was essentially a playoff, and Berwick won to stay up, and PL were victims of one of the 27 teams out of that league that seemed to get relegated last year, or whatever it was, the 5 teams. So
the reconstruction, they called it. It was almost a redestruction, wasn't it?
Redestruction as far as Preston Lodge were concerned. But that's a great reaction by them, and it's great to see them bounce back. They had a really strong mini rugby section when I was a kid at mini rugby. It was one of the few places you could actually get a game. So that they've got heritage there, and it's there for a rugby area, and it's great to see them going to come back up.
Well, we've had great respect for both those clubs in National 3, doing so well this season, Preston Lodge and Orkney. And we sent Sam Matthews down to the Penny Pit last week to cover that game for us. And he caught up with both the captain of Orkney, that's Liam Moore, and Jack Gordon, the captain from Preston Lodge.
Oh, amazing, mate. After last season, we were obviously a bit downhearted after Berwick, but we've came in this season fresh. Few boys brought in, and boys are more committed than ever. It's so amazing. A wee bit emotional, to be honest. I'm buzzing, absolutely buzzing.
And then you mentioned it's got a real family feel around the club. Obviously, you've got club coach, his son plays in the front row, his missus does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. What's it like here at such a small club but with such like a big family?
And my dad's the backs coach as well, so a few arguments in the house, but it's brilliant. With this season and last, I'd say we've really connected with the community. When you go back to the clubhouse, everybody knows each other. It's brilliant, and the crowds have just got bigger as the seasons went on. I've done really well over the social media as well to get people down that wouldn't have much to do on a Saturday, but now they're celebrating moments like this. It's superb.
And then on the field, sort of matched off the field, as you say, the skill level's really increased. What's it like having such a good pack and then having a centre combership like Paul Glynn and Blair Robertson?
Well, Paul and Yogi, they're veterans. They've been about for years and years, but they're only a few years older than me. But these guys are amazing. These guys are what PL's all about. And the forward pack, we've grown over the last few years, I would say. Last year we came up against somebody who's physical packs and we've learnt our lessons, and we're still a really young pack, but buzzing, and I'm super proud of the boys, honestly.
And now, how quick does it take before we focus on National 2, or is it just a case of enjoy these last few games?
We'll enjoy the weekend, maybe the Saturday Sunday one, and then after that we'll concentrate on the cup. But it's something good to concentrate on. We've got White Craigs, and then I think we play the winner of Carfa and Murrayfield, so we'll be hopefully looking to do quite well in the cup and test ourselves against some National 2 teams.
Scoreline says it all, but I felt as though we really stuck in the first half and put a couple of tries past them, but it's a difficult run to come to, and Preston Lodge, they played really well today.
I'm going to say that as well. Obviously difficult on the coastal conditions, and not only that, but they did manage to pack out quite a full stand today. How was it for you and the boys arriving off the bus today?
Well, we were excited, an exciting clash and the league decider, so the crowd was obviously very much in their favour, but that fired us up, and it's great to play in an environment like that.
How important was it to try and get the first points on the board today?
Oh, incredibly important. A team like Preston Lodge was always going to be an upfront battle, and we really wanted to set an intensity first and get on there, so we did that, but we let them into the game and they took advantage of that.
And then just a bit more on Orkney as a club, obviously out there on the island, a little bit isolated, but you've had such a rise over the past couple of seasons, and now obviously cementing yourselves firmly as a National 3 club pushing for that top spot. What's it like for such a small club with such big ambition and such a consistent turnout of players? Oh,
it's brilliant, it's exciting. As you say, we're not the biggest club and we have a small catchment area, so when we are putting up results challenging for the top of National 3, I think that really shows what we're all about and the skill level that Orkney Rugby Club has.
And then Orkney, as more of a family as well as a rugby club, you managed to get players to commit to such a journey every single weekend. You know, every second week you're playing away, which involves either a plane in a hotel or early ferries, late night ferries. How much of it do you have to buy into as a group of boys, as a group of external staff as well, everybody involved?
Yeah, across the board, coaching staff, players, everyone has to buy into it. And for the most part, everyone has this season. The response we've had from everyone and the community as well has been excellent, and it's really quite an exciting, bubbly environment in the club at the moment. And as you said, it's like a small family, and we just really enjoy playing for Orkney.
You've got 3 games in hand this season and 4 games left to go. How is it going to be now with that second place secured? Is there stuff you're going to work on? Are you going to look to bring in other boys, or is it just a case of let's really cement ourselves as a fear factor for next year?
Yeah, we're going to build on what we've got. We have no intention of slowing down. We still want to post excellent results, develop our own rugby, and that'll only benefit us going into next season and pre-season.
Good to hear from Liam Moore, Orkney captain, and Jack Gordon, Preston Lodge captain before that. 2 excellent clubs, and a bit of a contrast in motions there, but 2 great clubs who have done incredibly well this season. I was actually talking to Colin Faulkner of Kirkcaldy Rugby Clubs up at Kirkcaldy this week, and he was saying about trips in the past that they've had to Orkney. The SRU obviously help, I think 50% or something with the money, but it's still about $4,000 to get up there in travel, and it's a lot of commitment. As far as Orkney's concerned, I know they're well sponsored on the island, etc., but it's the commitment from the players as well as the financial burden on there, and you really have to be 100% behind the club.
I was literally going to say that about the buy-in and the commitment from players and coaches at Orkney must be absolutely incredible, because to do those journeys repeatedly throughout the season, that's got to take its toll. It's got to take its toll physically and mentally, and getting yourself up for it. So that is to their eternal credit. I don't know how they do it. In all honesty, you used to have a bus journey of any more than an hour, and it would be, your Saturday morning would be ruined just thinking about it. So no, all credit to him, but also all credit to the teams that, as you say, they head up there sometimes season after season after season, and yeah, but that's the game. That's the game. Geography is geography, and you've got Berwick, and you've got Aberdeen, and you've got Newton Stewart, and that's just the way it is. But Orkney, that's to their eternal credit. Yeah,
we saw Hamilton, of course, a couple of weeks ago. I think they got as far as the ferry, and the ferry was cancelled, and then they've got to come back and then do it all over again. And of course, these bus companies and the ferry companies, etc., you're not going to get many refunds out of them.
Oh no, not at all. And that's the challenge. That is the challenge. And of course, as you say, good on the SRU for the support, which helps rugby in Orkney. It gets the teams up there, etc. But yeah, it's a challenge.
Well, on the other end of the scale, down at the bottom, it's Cartha Queen's Park and Hamilton who are really battling it out to avoid the relegation. Cartha Queen's Park have won a couple of games this year. They're on 15 points. Hamilton haven't won at all, but they have had 6 try bonuses, 4 losing bonuses points there, but and they started off pretty well. They were getting very close to teams, but in the latter part of the season, they haven't done so well. So they're going through a bit of a struggle at the moment, and I guess out of the two, you would think Hamilton probably, sadly, be the favourites to go down.
Yeah, you'd say so. I mean, there's only 5 points in it, and they've got a game in hand, of course. But yeah, by virtue of the fact they've not won a game this season. But in saying that, they've lost 14 games. But their points difference is only, it's only minus 286. So it doesn't appear that they've been getting cricket scored all season. So yeah, they're just going to have to, they've got that game in hand, and it's going to be a battle, and you'd fancy Cartha Queen's Park, but it's not all over yet.
No, absolutely. Well, International 4, and it's been the story of Garnock unbeaten all season and dominant. There was 3 games played last weekend. That was Dunfermline 31, Strathmore 64, Garnock getting a 69-0 win over North Berwick at home, and Greenock 26, Stewartry 34. So those were the 3 games, but it's really all been about Garnock this season. They only need 7 points now from the last 4 games, and they're up International 3.
Great on them, well done, and yeah, just an absolutely remarkable season, and a 69-0 win against North Berwick tells you everything you need to know. They are absolutely flying.
What about your overall thoughts on the league structure then? This is the first time we've had 50 teams in all the leagues, 5 divisions of 10 in each. We've had quite a few come up from regional rugby as well, some doing better than others. Certainly in the case of Garnock, fantastic season they've had. They're going to be straight up to National 3, you would think, from National 4. What about the structure? Because there was this call, wasn't there, for more regional rugby to cut down on travelling and get more players, but the flip side of that is you've got a lot of regional clubs who want to be national clubs, and they want the chance to prove it.
Yeah, well, certainly I think the 10-team league thing certainly has worked. I've not heard too much grumbling in sort of National 3, National 4 about the geography and the fact it's not regional, that kind of thing. And yeah, it appears that regional clubs still are striving to get into the national setup. So I tend to be at more games, Premiership and National 1 and Peebles, etc. And so you maybe don't get a real sense of what it's like further down. But there's certainly no grumbling from what I'm hearing, and it looks to be working pretty well from what I can see.
It certainly does. And the 3 which will be going down from National 4 to be replaced by the 3 that win the regional 3 divisions. Looks like Perthshire at the moment, who are 11 points adrift from Greenock Wanderers in 7th place. Murrayfield Wanderers, it'll be very sad to see them go regional, that's for sure. And Rosseye, who've, they haven't had any luck at all this season, has he? In many different ways, just winning the 1, played 11 at the moment. They've obviously got a lot of games in hand, but they're well adrift at the bottom. So it'll be a shame to see those 3 go, if that's indeed what happens.
Yeah, that's right. If Rosseye are playing rugby matches at the moment, then that is to their credit, given what they've been through this season. Murrayfield Wanderers, that is sad to see her a couple of seasons there back in the day under Peter Wright. great time that was, a bit higher up the pyramid, so that's going to be sad to see. And Perthshire have flirted previously, with looking like they've been one of those upwardly mobile clubs, if that makes sense. I remember when Ryan Miller from Jedforest was there, etc., and you used to see a bit about them, and they looked to be in a pretty good place. So yeah, if they go down, then again, that's unfortunate for rugby in that part of the country.
And of course, end of the season, you always get a few dead rubbers in some leagues, and others, it goes right to the wire. It's difficult to actually come up with a solution. As we know, the playoff thing in the Premiership has certainly added excitement. There's no doubt about that, over the credibility of the league. But National 1 went right down to the wire the last 3 seasons. This season, a complete opposite, and it is difficult.
When it's 1 up and 1 down, that's the one thing you'd say, is that if it's 2 up and 2 down, or at least if there's a playoff between 9th in the Premier and 2nd in National 1 or whatever, that potentially could lead to less dead rubbers as it gets to this point of the season. But when it's 10-team leagues, can you have 2 up, 2 down? Is there too much of a gulf between them for a team to come up from National 3 to National 2, for example? Does it lead to more high scores and some teams turn out to be whipping boys? Who knows? But that would be the one thing. It's just trying to get as less dead rubbers in the game as possible.
Well, certainly Glasgow Ackies, they went straight up to National 1 and have done incredibly well this season. We've seen what Garnock's done in Division 4. Back in National 3, obviously Preston Lodge, who were effectively a National 2 team. The only reason they're a National 3 is because of the restructuring of the league, and 6 of them went down, or 5 went down. So half the league basically had to tumble down there. So I think next year we're going to find out the effect overall, which is going to be very, very interesting. But would you like to see playoffs down below as well, or do you think it's unnecessary? I like the idea of the 9th from the top division playing the 2nd in the one down there, because if you look at where things are at the moment with the clubs, I think that would be quite even matches.
Yeah, I think so. Or that, from an excitement and stuff to play for point of view, then that would add to that. I'm not sure about much more than that, to be honest. I think what we've got now with the 5 lots of 10 teams is working pretty well, and it could get tweaked here and there, but I think we've got something pretty solid now, so I don't know if it needs that much more done to it, to be honest. At least now give it a chance.
Yeah, I don't know why it was dropped, actually, because it was very successful. I remember the Dundee game against Hawick, which was several years ago now, but that was one of the classic games from Megatland, and ended 39-38, 3 penalty tries to Dundee that day.
Yeah,
it was an amazing fixture, it really was, and did create a lot of excitement at the end of the season. So I would like to see that return, I have to say. The other thing you could have is what some countries do, and that's the conference. They bring in the conference, where out of the 10 teams, you would probably split them into 5 or whatever, and then you'd have the top 2 from each conference doing a playoff effectively, and at least that way it's not known as a league. And I think that's always been one of the issues I've had, is that a league is a league, but if you call it a conference and it's not a league, then all of a sudden you play with the rules, and then you could have a situation where the top 4 teams go into a playoff, and then the bottom 6 would be looking at avoiding relegation.
It's a really good point. I think maybe the only thing with that is if you start to split it into conferences, then do you find yourself as a club playing the same teams? I don't know. That I quite like it as it is.
Yeah.
Or I think it's going to grow and develop. Certainly at the top of the Premiership, that it looks to be here to stay. And I think there's been buy-in from the clubs now. But I definitely agree with you in that it would be nice to at least mark the whoever finishes top of the pile in the regular league season. At least there to be something to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be very interesting to see what does happen there, and of course there will be a knock-on effect as well, because there's a lot of talk about, and I mean a lot of talk at the moment, about the upcoming Super Series being the last one. I'll stress that it's not officially been confirmed by the SIU yet. However, lots of people are talking about it. Clubs are openly talking about it, and if you're a betting man, you wouldn't really put your mortgage on it continuing beyond the sprint.
Yeah, there's rumours are abound as to what's going to happen. I don't know, to be honest. I'm one of those people when it comes to Super Series. I massively understand the point of it.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And that is to bridge the gap between Premier and pro level Edinburgh and Glasgow, and to help bring these under 20 boys through. Give them more competitive rugby. It's a monumentally higher standard than the club game, in my opinion, physically and on a skill level as well. So I massively understand the requirement for it.
So what's gone wrong, effectively?
Well, I was going to say, as a consumer, I'm going to put my hand on my heart here and say I wouldn't get up off the couch and look out the window if they were playing in my back garden. I just don't buy into it at all from a product point of view, but I monumentally understand the need for it from a rugby perspective and why it was actually brought in. I don't know what the answer is, to be honest, because you want that level. You want there to be a higher level of rugby, particularly for the under-20s. Looking back, they were beat at Wales last week, and some people were saying, well, that is the game that they could earmark as a win in this championship. And I think maybe this under-20s championship is almost going to be a bit of almost a yardstick as to whether or not it is actually working. Super Series, the futures and all that kind of stuff. So I really don't know what the solution is, but I do completely understand the need for something of that ilk.
I think there are pluses and there's certainly a lot of minuses. One of the things I've always felt, and you mentioned there kind of hinting about it, about you wouldn't get off the couch. The thing is, you don't need to get off the couch because they were, at the start anyway, they were beaming everything live into the living room. At a time when it's a semi-pro game, you need people through the gates. You made it so easy by having these live games where you didn't even have to move, particularly if it was a horrible day outside. You could stay in and watch it. And like for the Southern Nights, for instance, all you could see really was a row of very clean black and yellow seats with not many people on them.
Yeah, I think looking at the Southern Nights in particular, they at one point were in a better place, if you like, than they are now, and they were pretty successful, and there was starting to be public buy-in, I would say, and that's dissipated, however, for one reason or another. Yes, I agree with what you said about they wanted it from a product point of view to be on TV and all that kind of stuff, and I completely understand that. But I'm an example when I had more interest in it as a consumer as I do now. When it was in its infancy, I lived at the time literally 90 seconds walk from the green yards, and if it was on TV and it wasn't 25 degrees and sunshine outside, I was watching it on TV. So there's your case in point. But yeah, it's not grown as a product that makes somebody like me want to consume it now, like I say. But I completely understand the need for it, and that's where I'm conflicted. To be honest. So I really don't know what the solution is. There's talk of a new 10-team thing, which will effectively replace the Premiership, I guess, or that will become the Premiership. The Super Rugby will come back into the Premiership, and whether that'll work or not will remain to be seen. Whether that transpires as to what happens will remain to be seen. But yeah, it's such a tricky one because you can't please all the people all the time, and some people will always just hate it because they hate it, and because Mark Dodson was the person, it was his baby, and so I hate it because of that. Not all that kind of nonsense, frankly. It's here currently, and it serves its purpose for what it was intended to do. But Southern Nights, again, taking it back to that, just rebrand as Melrose. There will be a reason as to why that's not happened yet, and I completely understand why they didn't come in as Melrose. And I get the reasons, but there's probably been people from Melrose Rugby fans that have drifted away from Southern Nights that would be back if it was rebranded as Melrose.
And of course the age-old question of the traditionalists, if you like, wanting it to be the south of Scotland. Melrose doing as much as they could to get the buy-in from other clubs, failing, really. Yeah. It's very, very difficult to change people's minds.
Totally, and like I say, that's why it was the Southern Nights rather than Melrose. It was to hopefully become the Borders or the South in a different in a different name, and it maybe worked at the start, but it's not working now. So to me, from a business standpoint, the first thing I would be saying is, well, let's bring this back to Melrose. You're not going to attract any more or any less players. If players want to come and play at that level of rugby in the Borders, for example, or North England or wherever, they're going to come regardless of whether you call it Melrose or Southern Nights or the South or the Borders or whatever. They're going to come. Doesn't matter. But you'll bring in some of the people that left almost because you did call it Southern Nights and didn't brand it as what it was, i.e. Melrose.
Yeah, and of course another thing as well. I mean, the traditional South thing. The games were played at Kelso, at Selkirk, at Jedforest. It really didn't matter. It was their team that were taking it around the grounds. Clearly, in this day and age, you cannot do that. You have to have a base. Yeah. People didn't like that, but that's the way it was. To me, the biggest problem was the fact that it was sold as 6 teams who were going to play off against each other, but then there was going to be a cross-border competition.
Yeah.
There was lots of opportunities to play others. Now, if you're playing each other 6 teams 4 or 5 times each season, that becomes less and less attractive. And I think because they couldn't nail that cross-border competition with the Welsh teams or wherever it was, there was like a false promise in the end.
So you've just about knocked the nail on the head for me. Again, putting my consumer hat on it, it's just too much of the same. It's too repetitive. It's the same teams, the same players, etc. Now, again, if Southern Knights are playing Stirling Wolves, am I going to leave my house and go watch it on a Friday night? I probably am, to be honest. But if they're playing Ealing Trailfinders, I'll probably be one of the first people down there.
As I said, a lot of talk about the Super Series, Sprint Series being the last one. We actually spoke to the Director of Rugby, Neil Hinnigan, about his own thoughts, because obviously if it does end, then what happens? And what about the problems? Here's Neil Hinnigan.
It could be chaos, if I'm honest, because you've then got a huge amount of players looking for somewhere to play. You know, in the city it could be who's giving me 5 pence a mile more, who's doing what, you know, where's all the guys going to play, and do I play with my friends, do I play for money, what is it? Because all these guys are used to getting paid now, so they have to go somewhere. Some of them won't be from here, there will be people drift away from Scotland, but you will look at these city teams, and for example, Ayr and Heriot's are already in the Premiership next season. Let's say they cut it in May. How strong are Ayr particularly going to be in this Premiership? Heriot's probably won't be far behind them. It changes the landscape completely. So clubs like Kelso or Musselburgh or, you know, Selkirk, who have been building quietly, trying to maintain this level or get better, are all of a sudden going to be a huge disadvantage to compete. So for me, it could cause a lot of chaos. But I mean, you know, it happens. There's nothing. It's not really in our control. We just have to react. But I can see there being issues.
Issues with it, issues without it.
Yeah, that would. You have to try things in life. You can't please all the people all the time. But yeah, I agree with a lot of what Neil says there. If overnight they were to disband it and these players all need a place to play rugby, then yeah, there's going to be some superpowers in whatever forms. You know, whether it's a new Premiership, or there are going to be some absolute superpowers, and there's going to be the have-nots. And you know, they'll probably quite quickly be two leagues within a league. There's your conference thing that you wanted after all. But you know, Selkirk, Kelso, Musselburgh, even Hawick. If you take all the city-based players out of Super Rugby and drop them into Heriots and Edinburghs and Curry, and of course Ayr. I mean, Ayr were going to do serious damage next season anyway in the club game with having the ability for the players to play up and play down. You can almost pick and choose what team you're going to put out depending on who Super 6 is playing, and depending on, you know, Super 6 has got Futures at home this week. Club team's got Hawick away. Or we'll do a bit of shuffling. You know, we'll do a bit of shuffling there up and down, and why not? That's the rules. So yeah, there could quite quickly become some haves and have-nots, and quite a disparity between some of the teams.
And what about the money, the investment? There's a huge amount of money went into the launch of Super 6, as it was at the time. Where's that money going to go? Hopefully, you would think back down to club rugby and grassroots level. What do you think will happen?
The money surely would need to still be ring-fenced for the purpose of getting players better ready for either the pro game or the Scotland under-20s, which in turn then feeds back into the pro game and the national team and all that kind of stuff. So whatever they come up with to replace it, now let's just say that it's a ring-fenced, as is some of the rumours are going about, a ring-fenced 10-team Premiership,
which I don't like. I love the idea of relegation,
possibly with no relegation, but the money would have to find its way into there, or else you've now not got any sort of funding to create this platform that's going to do the job of getting these players ready for stepping up, or is it just going to be either going to completely, if it's all about the top of the pyramid and it's what's best for the national team, you could potentially take the money out of it and pay 2 oven ready players from South Africa or whatever to come in and go straight into Glasgow or Edinburgh, go straight into the national team. Who knows?
The other question is, when it comes to the likes of Heriots Blues and Heriots and Ayrshire Bulls and Ayr, you know, what happens there? Because at the moment you've got kind of 2 separate teams. Do we end up getting a second team within the league system, or
I think that's
more complication, isn't it? Because you put the 2 squads together, it ain't going to fit.
No. I think what would happen is you'd have the 6 clubs that started Super Series, and then say the top 4 of next season's Premiership potentially, and let's say that worked out like this season, but then you've got Ayr coming up. So
where does it all fit in?
Well, Ayr, I guess, like Melrose as well. Ayr stroke Melrose would have one team, and then Harriet's club team would have to come down to accommodate. Yeah, same.
Difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. So no, it is.
Who would be an administrator in Scottish rugby?
That's it. It's a problem from an administration point of view, and what happens to our club point of view, and that's what a lot of people's main concern is in the club game in Scotland. What happens to us? And is there then a wee bit of parochialism and all that kind of stuff comes in? But yeah, yes, there is. Do people always think about the greater good? No, they don't. In all walks of life, and that's nature's way. I know I was.
Well, look at the playoffs then. I mean, who is actually going to vote against the playoffs if you're a club, particularly if you're a lower club? And I won't mention any names. You don't need to. The fact is, though, that if a team knows they've got a better chance of getting the title, they're going to vote for that, aren't they? Kelso made the fourth spot, 25 points adrift of Hawick. That's just the way it is. But they're still in with a chance now of becoming Scottish champions. They've got to go to Hawick and win. They've got to then go away in the final to win. But it can be done, as Stirling Wolves has proved. No one's going to vote against that if you're a club.
No, that's it. And you've got different aspects to clubs as well. You've got the rugby side. What's best for our the rugby side and our youth development and all that kind of stuff, and our player pathways. And then you've got you've got treasurers, and you've got people with business interests, and people that have got fingers in the pie and all that kind of stuff, and snouts in the trough in some instances, and they're only interested in the purse strings or what they as individuals can get out of it. And so there's conflicts all over the place. But that's always been, it's always been the case. And so going back to the point about what happens after Super Series, if it gets disbanded, then who knows? It could either work okay, or as Neil alluded to, it could in the infancy at least, it could be a right old mess.
You mentioned pathways just now, and that brings us quite neatly to the lack of borderers coming through the system at the moment. Putting the borders hat on and highlighted last week by the 99-year wait for no borderer to be selected in a Scottish team. And now that the French team has been announced once again for the second game running, no borderers in there. And the last time that happened, that we had two consecutive Scottish teams not having a border in it, 1920 and 1921. So we're talking 103 years ago when that last happened. This new system and the new way that things are, no pro team in the borders, it's all beginning now to come to the surface. And who's coming through from the borders area to take the places? And is there a pathway, a proper pathway? Because you look at Glenn Young, his pathway to Scottish cap was very different to Darcy Graham's.
I think you have to say, again, looking at the borders hat on, you can't say it's not been coming. We've not had much representation in the Scotland squad for a while now. It was always ever going to take a couple of injuries to a Darcy or whatever, and Stuart Hogg retires and Darcy gets injured, and then all of a sudden there's nobody in the squad. Does it start with the fact that in Scotland as a whole there are only two pro teams? There's only so many players that can get into those two particular pro teams, because it's that gives you the best chance. They're owned by the union, and the union can dictate when they play. And they're up to Six Nations when they play, and when they don't play, and they don't need to go in the gap week in the Six Nations. They don't need to go back and play in France for their club, or go. Finn Russell probably has to go play for Bath and all that kind of stuff. So you've got more chance of progressing and being in the national team squad if you play for Edinburgh and Glasgow. But there's only the two of them now. Those teams then have the pick of all the best talent coming through, lots of which comes through the school system, the public school system, if you like, the Merkeys and the Watsons and the Stu Mells and all that kind of stuff. And there's only limited places available for kids to become professional rugby players in Scotland. And at times it'll be an there's nobody from the north, or there'll always be Edinburgh and Glasgow. That's where the schools are. But it probably comes down to no more than that, coupled with the fact that, it's probably been said 100 times before, if there's less kids playing the game because kids have other interests now, there's less kids playing in the borders, therefore there's less kids that are going to be naturally brilliant that can then slot into a pathway that can then get to an Edinburgh or Glasgow. So there's all kinds of socio-economic reasons, and all it's life in general to an extent. But there's, if there's 4 or 5 pro teams in Scotland, which that's a hypothetical situation, there never will be, but if there's 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 pro teams in Scotland, then there'll be more players from all the regions and there'll be more representation from all the regions.
And less local heroes, because you haven't even touched on the big elephant in the room question, is that most of the players are in fact not in Scotland.
That's it. But we have to remember when we're filling the comments section of the offside line, articles and all this kind of stuff, when people are doing that, and this guy's coming from here and this guy's coming, this guy's already been capped by England. We don't have the resources that South Africa have, and England have, and France have, and Ireland have, and Wales have got more pro teams than us, and New Zealand. We just don't have the luxury. Now there are absolutely things that we could have done better to prepare for this. Ireland were in a similar predicament. It's, do we have one eye on 15-20 years time and get cricket scored a lot of the times in the meantime, and then people start drifting away from Murrayfield, and all of a sudden it's difficult to sell out the Italy game again, and actually we're not even really selling everything for the Welsh game. So it's a tricky one. And how do you balance between success now that Joe Public craves and building for the future when you don't have the playing resources that a France or an England have?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because we want the success, and the success is going to come from getting a really big front row from South Africa or other countries or whatever, because we don't naturally breed them that big. But also, if you do get success, then hopefully, although there's less opportunities for players to come through, success will breed, hopefully, interest at lower level.
Oh yeah, and it's that's it. It's almost that self-fulfilling prophecy. But for the short term, at least, I don't see the strategy for success at the top level being anything other than what it is at the moment. You just need to look and see who, and I don't mean this word in a negative way, but like some people use it, but players that have been parachuted in. But that's where we are at the moment, and this ain't a quick fix. If we want a team of 12 Scottish born bred players, now let's not forget as well, New Zealand, the most successful team ever, they've always had players in from the islands.
Oh yeah.
France have done pretty well out of they plunder the islands now at a young age, and there's always there's Bundy Aki, and there's guys in all the teams. There's guys in all the teams. It just us at the moment, we've seemed to have a wee bit more than some others, but we've got the lowest numbers from which to start, and we're a small nation at the end of the day.
Well, let's bring it back to the club again, because we're going slightly off point, but bring it back to something which is definitely got a big plus and a big tick next to it, and that's the Inter-District Championship, which we played this year in full. We had a taster of it last year, which should have been 3 games, but it ended up with 2. But Caledonia Reds deservedly winning the championship at that final against the South at Braidholme, South's first defeat this century. Something which I know that Matty Douglas will want to reverse, and Sean Muir, when it comes to the big event this year. It's happening in March and April, and it's giving the club players a real opportunity to step up and represent their district.
Oh yeah, it's so good to have it back, and it's another thing that lights the fire, if you like, under players and keeps players interested when it gets to this time of the year. And yeah, it's brilliant that it's going to be a full old school championship this year. People have been yearning for it to be back for years. It appeared last year in its abbreviated format to be really quite successful. I mean, the crowd that turned out when we were at that first South game on a Tuesday night,
1,500, dreadful weather as
1,500 people. So yeah, it's got the makings of being a great addition to the club rugby scene, like it used to be. I mean, it was when I was a kid, it was massive. When the South played at Jed, that was everything. As a kid, you just wanted to be at the South game to see Rutherford and see Laidlaw and Keith Robertson, and then it moved to Gary Armstrong and Chick Chalmers, and these were absolute ding dongs against Edinburgh and Glasgow. And so yeah, if it can get anything, if it can get itself to even being back to half of that, then absolutely bring it on.
And it begs the question, why don't we go back to the districts then?
Well, that's I kind of did wonder if that's where you were going to. Oh, there's a lot of logic in that. There really is.
Well, you've got the spectators for a start. You've got the buy-in from the players. You've certainly got the buy-in from the spectators. This is the step up that I think people would want to have.
Yes, in lots of regards. From an identity point of view, it would be better. But I still think it gives the club players something to play for, the district championship in its own right. Super Rugby requires more from the players. It requires more from guys that hold down day jobs. It requires gym work. It requires a lot more goes into it than turning up on a Tuesday and Tuesday night and Thursday night and maybe not even doing that and then turning out for your club on a Saturday. So that there will be reasons, but from an identity point of view, it would work brilliantly.
Yeah, and I think also, obviously, we had 6 teams in the Super 6 and we thought that was too little. There's only 4 district teams, but as a big thing within the calendar of the new Premiership, then that would certainly work.
Oh yeah, well, if and when Super Series ends, then the landscape changes completely and the Inter-District Championship will be impacted by that, either in a positive way or in a negative. If it's a 10-team Premier League again, then it's kind of gone back to what it used to be, albeit, as you say, with probably a much higher standard, both physically and from a skill point of view. But then potentially the district championship becomes that pinnacle again for the players. But yeah, so much is up in the air at the moment, and the inter-district championship could find itself being impacted before it's properly got out the ground, depending on what happens with Super Series.
Well, it's been a really interesting discussion as well. It gives us a chance, as there's no matches this weekend, apart from, obviously, I must mention, Last Wade are playing Stuart's Melville on Friday night under the lights at Hawthornden. But we'll be back to normal next week. We'll hopefully have Dale Clancy back as well. But in the meantime, thanks to Robin for deputising, and we'll see you all next week.